When the stories of Liberian women are told, it will be told in two parts: women as victims and fighters, the traditional stories of rape and violent abuse, mutilation, gross humiliation, and disempowerment of women. And the second part of the story, and that's the part of the story I'm here to tell, the women's victory over the callous display of patriarchy, political violence.
Between 2003 and 2005, Liberia witnessed national watershed moments: the end of civil war, the resignation of a warmongering politician, and the ascension of Africa's first female president. But these public transformations arose from a private turning point: the involvement of women in peacekeeping. From April to August 2003, the Women of Liberia Mass Action for Peace campaign united women in calls to end the Second Liberian Civil War. They protested outside President Charles Taylor's residence, demanded established politicians and rebel leaders attend peace talks, and pressured delegates to negotiate until they agreed to their campaign's position statement. Under the leadership of Lima Bowie, a war survivor and activist for trauma healing, the peace campaign spurred a turning point in Liberia's historical relationship with conflict resolution, employing nonviolent resistance and providing a model for inclusive grassroots peace building. To see the significance of the Women's Peace Campaign, we must begin with Liberia's founding, where colonial and racial dichotomies marked the nation's complex character. Fearful that the rising black population would inspire a slave revolution, the American Colonial Society negotiated a portion of the West African coast to relocate freeborn African Americans and emancipated slaves. These individuals, along with African men and women liberated from slave boats en route to the New World, settled Liberia as a colony in 1822. This foundational tie to the United States produced a persistent social hierarchy. Settlers who arrived from slave boats, known as Congo people, and those from America, Americo-Liberians, formed a political and economic elite, viewing themselves as more civilized than the indigenous African tribes. Although some government officials defended the system as a way of ensuring Western alliances, the caste tension led to large-scale conflicts. In 1980, a military coup led by Samuel Doe, a Liberian of non-American descent, assassinated Americo-Liberian President William Tolbert. Doe seized power as head of state and introduced a new constitution establishing the Second Republic of Liberia. Although the Reagan administration continued to support Liberia financially, the Doe regime proved corrosive, twisting into a dictatorship. In 1989, Charles Taylor, an Americo-Liberian previously accused of embezzlement, formed the National Patriotic Front of Liberia and invaded Monrovia, the nation's capital. For the next 7 years, Taylor and his rebel forces waged a callous military campaign and committed heinous war crimes. Sexual violence, torture, and child soldiers characterized the First Civil War. But where are the women in this story? As Lima Bowie writes, look in the background of the grainy news reports. You'll find the mothers of child soldiers fleeing street warfare, weeping and kneeling before their children's graves. But beneath the statistics of rape lie stories of adversity and transformation. In 1989, Lima Bowie turned 17. She was about to graduate at the top of her high school class and pursue aspirations of medical school when the National Patriotic Front of Liberia invaded her home. As the situation deteriorated, Lima and her family fled Liberia on a refugee boat to Ghana. By the time her family settled at a camp, all of Lima's ambitions had dissolved. In May 1991, the West African Peacekeeping Force moved into Monrovia, providing a break in the fighting. Lima travels to Liberia, but upon arrival, recognizes her mistake. Ports reek of death and destruction. The ashes of buildings burned to the ground litter streets, and university buildings serve as bases for military assault. Here, Lima marries an abusive man and enters a cycle of domestic violence. She describes her life as shattered. After birthing 4 children, Lima realizes the need for personal change. To escape the nightmare at home, she participates in a UNICEF program that trains war survivors on social work and trauma healing, a practice that captivates Lima. She offers counsel to female victims of rape from Sierra Leone, an experience that inspires her to leave her abusive marriage. She works with teenage soldiers, counsels their displaced wives, and observes how women absorb pain like sponges. She finds that questioning the meaning of conflict and affirming the need for peace begins to lighten the fatigue of war. She wants to empower women with the same revelation. In 2000, the Second Civil War erupts. Militant groups led by indigenous warlords attack the Taylor regime. Violence rages again. In 2002, Lima organizes the Christian Women's Peace Initiative, the first stage of the peace campaign. The initiative started with a group of Lutheran women praying and discussing their volition for peace weekly, but Muslim women joined the sessions as more communities hear about Lima's program. Historically, Christian and Muslim Liberian women rarely interact on political matters, rendering the peace initiative more radical. Still, Lima feels that prayer is not enough. The women need to take action. The next step is the creation of the Peace Outreach Project. During the 9 months the project was active, Lima and women from the church reached out to women across Liberia, speaking directly, posting flyers, and attempting to change the view that peace negotiation was a men's business. The project solidifies the Christian-Muslim alliance and unifies the women in conviction for peace. On April 1st, 2003, the women staged their first protest, communicating across the country via radio. Clad in all white, over 2,500 women convened at a market visible from the president's manor. Over the next week, they sat, danced, and sang for peace, displaying banners that read, "The women of Liberia want peace now." That week, rebel forces, along with Taylor's army, attacked displacement camps in Monrovia. As the violence escalated, the international community called for peace talks. The women seconded the call, urging Taylor and the rebels to negotiate. Both sides refused. On April 11th, the Women of Liberia Mass Action for Peace issued a position statement on the crisis. Bearing their message of nonviolent resolution, the women marched through Monrovia and demanded to meet with Taylor. Lima presented the campaign statement to Taylor while the rest of the women prayed. Eventually, Taylor agrees. Next, the campaign targeted rebel forces, demanding that they too participate in the negotiations. A party of women traveled to the rebels' headquarters and convinced them to attend peace talks in Ghana. During the first negotiations, Taylor is accused of war crimes and flees to Liberia to avoid arrest. Meanwhile, a full-scale war breaks out in Monrovia, even as the peace talks continued. The women send for reinforcements and stage a major action in Accra. They barricade the building where the negotiations take place, sat down, and linked arms, refusing to let the delegates leave. After threatening to remove her clothing, an extreme cultural offense, Lima is invited into the negotiation room. 3 weeks later, Taylor resigns from the presidency and exiles himself to Nigeria. Although the women won their settlement and celebrate with a victory march, they decide that they should stay involved to ensure the transitional government implements the agreement. Over the next 2 years, the Women of Liberia Mass Action for Peace group aid the government in bringing about democratic elections. In 2005, Liberia elects its first female president, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. While Liberia still struggles with violence prevention, the peace campaign ushered in an international awareness of women's importance in peace building. Lima Bowie went on to receive her master's from Eastern Mennonite University in Virginia and a doctorate in social justice. She maintains leadership in the Women, Peace, and Security Network Africa and dedicates herself to uplifting women in peace and security governance. Lima and President Sirleaf shared the 2011 Nobel Prize. This year, the West African Network for Peacebuilding worked to ensure a safe, nonviolent presidential election. The women of Liberia not only ended the Civil War, but blazed the path for women to join the negotiation table, a turning point the nation of Liberia and the global community is grateful for.
Before I end, we have some powerful women from Liberia who came. Make some noise, let them hear you.